Welcome back to Dark Myth Western Tales where love conquers all and secrets run deeper than canyon walls. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because you won't want to miss a single story from the untamed frontier. Today's tale will take you on an emotional journey through Wyoming territory in 1878, where an exiled Apache healer saves the life of a dying cowboy, only to discover he's the son of the man who destroyed her family. But some secrets are worth dying for, and some loves are worth living for. So settle in, dim the lights, and let me tell you about Ayanna and Cole and how healing a broken heart sometimes means breaking your own first. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoy these epic Western romances. It helps more folks discover these stories of love loss and redemption. The Healer's Secret. When Apache medicine meets a broken cowboy's heart. The Wyoming wind carried death on its breath that November night in 1878, howling through the canyon walls like the spirits of the lost. Snow fell in thick, silent curtains, blanketing the rugged terrain in deceptive beauty that could kill a man as surely as any bullet. Ayanna Crow Feather pulled her elk-hide cloak tighter around her shoulders as she gathered the last of the winter sage from the sheltered grove. The plants would be crucial for the healing teas that would see her through the harsh months ahead. At 23, she had learned to read the signs that others missed. The way the deer moved differently before a storm, how certain birds fell silent when danger approached the particular scent the wind carried when it brought more than snow. Tonight it brought the metallic smell of blood. She paused, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air, and listened. Beyond the wind's mournful song, she caught something else, the labored breathing of something large, something hurt. Her dark eyes scanned the swirling snow, searching for the source. There at the mouth of her hidden canyon, a dark shape lay crumpled against the rocks. Ayanna approached carefully, her moccasined feet silent on the snow. In this territory, injured animals were often more dangerous than healthy ones, and injured men could be deadlier still. But as she drew closer, her healer's instincts overrode her caution. A man lay face down in the snow, his buckskin coat dark with blood that steamed in the cold air. An arrow protruded from his back just below his right shoulder blade. The fletching was wrong for Apache work. These were the crude arrows of white men trying to make the attack look like Indian trouble. She knelt beside him and carefully turned him over. His face was pale as the snow around him, his lips already taking on the blue tinge of death. Young perhaps, near her own age, with the weathered hands of a working man and the lean frame of someone who knew hunger more than plenty. His eyes fluttered open as she touched his forehead, checking for fever. They were the color of summer sky, startling in their clarity even as they struggled to focus. "Angel," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the wind. Ayanna's heart clenched at the word. No one had called her anything approaching angel in many years. To the whites she was a breed, a half-blood to be tolerated at best. To the Apache she was tainted, marked by her white mother's blood, and exiled for the shame it brought. "You are not dying today," she said firmly, though she wasn't certain if she spoke the truth. "Can you help me move you?" He managed a weak nod, and together they struggled to get him upright. Each movement sent fresh blood flowing from his wound, staining the snow in dark patterns that looked like prophecies written in a language she didn't want to read. Her hidden canyon was only 50 yards away, but it might as well have been 50 miles. Step by agonizing step, she half-carried, half-dragged him through the narrow opening that led to her sanctuary. The walls of rock provided shelter from the wind, and her small fire still glowed in the shallow cave she called home. Getting him inside took the last of both their strength. He collapsed onto the pile of furs that served as her bed, unconscious again, but still breathing. Barely. Ayanna knelt beside him and examined the wound more carefully. The arrow had gone deep, but by some miracle had missed the major blood vessels. It would have to come out, and soon, before fever and infection claimed what blood loss had not. She prepared her tools with the ritual care her grandmother had taught her. A sharp obsidian blade, silk-thin strips of deer sinew needles carved from porcupine quills. She built up the fire and set water to boil in the iron pot she'd traded for 3 winters ago. The hardest part would be keeping him still while she worked. Men often thrashed when the pain hit, and a poorly timed movement could drive the arrow deeper or tear the wound beyond repair. She mixed a tea from willow bark and prairie smoke, tilting his head up to pour small amounts between his lips. He swallowed reflexively, and after a few minutes his breathing deepened slightly. It wouldn't dull the pain completely, but it might keep him from moving at the crucial moment. Working by firelight, she cut his shirt away from the wound. The arrow had punched through the buckskin and buried itself nearly to the fletching in the meat of his shoulder. Blood had clotted around the shaft, which was both blessing and curse. It had slowed the bleeding, but removing the arrow would start it flowing again. Ayana closed her eyes for a moment and whispered a prayer to the spirits of healing. Her grandmother had always said that the hands were merely tools. It was the spirit that guided them that knew where to cut and where to mend. She gripped the arrow shaft and pulled. The man's back arched off the furs, a strangled cry escaping his lips. But he didn't wake. The arrow came free, with a wet tearing sound that made her stomach clench. Fresh blood welled from the wound, bright red in the firelight. Now came the true test of her skill. She packed the wound with moss soaked in a tincture of golden seal and wild garlic, then began the delicate work of stitching the torn flesh. Each suture had to be perfect. Too loose and the wound wouldn't heal properly, too tight and the flesh would tear. By the time she finished, false dawn was lightening the mouth of the canyon. The man's breathing was steadier now, his color less alarming. She covered him with warm furs and banked the fire, then sat back on her heels to study her patient. He was handsome in the way of men who spent their lives outdoors, lean and weathered with the kind of stillness that spoke of familiarity with solitude. His dark hair was longer than fashion dictated, curling slightly at his collar. His hands, which she had cleaned of blood, were scarred from rope and labor, but graceful in their proportions. Who was he? What had brought him to her canyon with an arrow in his back and death breathing down his neck? The questions would have to wait. For now, it was enough that he lived. Over the next 3 days, Ayana tended him with the devotion she might have shown a wounded hawk or wolf, any creature that depended entirely on her care for survival. She changed his dressings, fed him broth when he was conscious enough to swallow, and watched for the signs of fever that could still claim him. On the 4th morning, she woke to find him watching her. "You're real," he said, his voice hoarse but stronger than before. "Did you think otherwise?" She kept her tone neutral, but something in his gaze made her pulse quicken. "For a while there, I wasn't sure." He struggled to sit up, wincing at the pull on his healing wound. "I remember snow and blood and thinking I was going to die alone out there. Then I saw you and I thought maybe the angels had come to collect me after all." Heat rose in Ayana's cheeks. "I am no angel, just someone who knows which plants heal and which harm." "What's your name?" She hesitated. Names had power, her grandmother had always said. To give your name to a stranger was to give them a piece of your spirit. But this man had already seen her at her most vulnerable, had trusted her with his life while he lay helpless. "Ayana," she said finally. "It means eternal blossom in my father's tongue. I'm Cole Morrison." He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. His grip was warm and firm, calloused from years of hard work. "I owe you my life, Ayana." Something in the way he said her name made her breath catch. Not the careful pronunciation of someone trying not to offend, but natural, as if he'd been saying it all his life. "You owe me nothing," she replied, pulling her hand back, perhaps more quickly than necessary. "The spirits brought you to my canyon. I merely did as they asked." Over the following days, as Cole's strength returned, they fell into an easy rhythm. She would gather plants and tend to the small chores that kept her alive in this hidden place, while he watched and gradually began to help with what his injured arm would allow. He proved surprisingly adept at tending the fire and preparing the simple meals they shared. They talked little at first, but the silence between them was comfortable rather than awkward. Cole seemed content to simply observe her as she worked, and she found his presence oddly soothing after so many years of solitude. It was during the 2nd week of his recovery that she first heard him laugh. She had been grinding acorns for winter bread when a chipmunk, grown bold from the warm weather near the fire, had darted out to steal a nut. In her surprise, Ayana knocked over the grinding bowl, sending processed acorn meal flying in all directions. Cole's laughter rang out clear and genuine, the first truly joyful sound her canyon had heard in years. The chipmunk, startled by the noise, dropped his prize and scampered away, chittering indignantly. "I'm sorry," Cole said, still chuckling as she stared at him in surprise. "But the look on your face when that little bandit made his move." Despite herself, Ayana felt her own lips twitch. "He has been watching me work for days, planning his raid." "Smart little fellow." Can't say I blame him for wanting to get closer to you." The words hung in the air between them, and Ayana felt that strange flutter in her chest again. She turned back to cleaning up the scattered meal, hoping he couldn't see the confusion in her face. "Tell me about this place," Cole said, perhaps sensing her discomfort. "How did you find it?" "I did not find it," she replied, grateful for the change of subject. "It found me 3 winters ago when the soldiers came to move my mother's people to the reservation. I hid here until they left." "Your mother's people?" "Cheyenne. My father was Apache, but he had been dead many years. My mother remarried a Cheyenne warrior, and I lived with his people after she passed." The old pain flickered in her chest, but it was distant now, like an echo. "They were kind to me, but when the time came to choose between the reservation and uncertainty, I chose uncertainty." Cole was quiet for a moment. That must have been frightening a young woman alone out here. "Less frightening than the reservation," she said simply. "Here I am, free to practice the old ways, to heal as my grandmother taught me, to live according to the Spirit's will rather than the government's." "What about other people? Don't you get lonely?" The question struck deeper than she had expected. Lonely was too small a word for what she had felt during the long winter nights when the wind howled through the rocks and she had no voice but her own to break the silence. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but loneliness is a small price for freedom." Cole nodded slowly. "I understand that. I've been running from civilization myself for the better part of 2 years." "Running from what?" His expression darkened. "Complicated family business. The kind that gets you shot with an arrow if you're not careful." She waited for him to elaborate, but he fell silent, staring into the fire with the same haunted look she sometimes saw in her own reflection in the stream. As the days passed, Cole's strength returned steadily. He was able to help with more tasks, and Ayana found herself looking forward to their conversations by the fire each evening. He had a quick mind and a dry wit that delighted her, and he listened to her stories of the old ways with genuine interest, rather than the polite tolerance that she had grown accustomed to. He told her about his travels across the territory, the towns he'd seen, the people he'd met, the vast spaces that stretched between settlements. His descriptions painted pictures in her mind of places she had never seen but somehow yearned to visit. It was during one such conversation, nearly 3 weeks after his arrival, that she noticed him fingering something at his throat. "What is it you wear there?" she asked, nodding toward the leather cord that disappeared beneath his shirt. Cole's hand stilled. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer, but then he pulled the cord free. Hanging from it was a small silver locket, tarnished with age, but clearly valuable. "My mother's," he said quietly. "The only thing I have left of her." Ayana's breath caught. The locket was unusual, shaped like a feather and etched with symbols that looked almost familiar. "May I?" she asked, extending her hand. Cole hesitated, then leaned forward to let her examine the locket more closely. The moment her fingers touched the silver, her world tilted. She knew those symbols, had seen them before, carved into the medicine pouch her father had carried, etched into the silver bracelet he had given her, mother, as a wedding gift. They were Apache symbols, signs of protection and healing. "Where did your mother get this?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral, even as her heart began to race. "I don't know," Cole admitted. "She died when I was young. My father said it was the only thing she had when he found her." Found her. She was, she had been captive. Apache raiders killed her family and took her when she was 16. My father was part of the cavalry unit that rescued her 3 years later. The locket suddenly felt cold against Ayana's fingers. "What was your father's name?" "Captain James Morrison, Wyoming Territorial Cavalry." The world stopped. Morrison. The name hit her like a physical blow, driving the breath from her lungs. She must have made some sound because Cole leaned forward, concerned. "Ayana, are you all right?" She couldn't speak, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at the man she had saved, the man she had nursed back to health, the man whose gentle hands and kind words had awakened feelings she thought had died with her family. Morrison, the name that had haunted her dreams for 15 years. The name spoken in whispers around the fire when the elders told the stories of the old days. The name of the cavalry officer who had led the raid that destroyed her village, scattered her people, and killed her father. Captain James Morrison, who had cut down Chief Crow Feather in cold blood while he tried to protect the women and children. Cole Morrison, son of her father's killer. "I have to," she started, then stopped, her voice breaking. "I need some air." She stumbled out of the cave and into the cold night, leaving Cole staring after her in confusion. The stars wheeled overhead, distant and indifferent to the storm raging in her heart. For 3 weeks she had cared for this man, had grown to trust him, to enjoy his company, to feel things she had never felt before. She had saved his life with her own hands, poured her skill and knowledge into keeping him alive. And he was the son of the man who had murdered her father. The irony was so bitter it made her stomach turn. Of all the men who might have stumbled bleeding into her canyon, why this one? Why the son of Captain Morrison? She thought of her father, proud and strong, in her childhood memories. Chief Crow Feather had been a man of peace, working to find ways for his people to coexist with the ever-growing tide of white settlers. He had spoken against the young warriors who wanted to fight, had counseled patience and wisdom. And Captain Morrison had shot him down like a dog. At least that's what the survivors had told her. She had been only 8 years old, hidden in her mother's lodge with the other children while the attack raged outside. By the time it was over, half the village was dead or wounded, and her father lay cooling in the dust beside the burned remnants of the council lodge. Her mother had taken her and fled west, eventually finding refuge with the Cheyenne band that would become their new home. But the wound had never healed the loss, never fully accepted. Her father's death had shaped every day of her life since. And now his killer's son lay sleeping in her bed, alive because of her skill, alive because she had chosen to save rather than let die. The spirits had a cruel sense of humor. She stayed outside until the cold drove her back into the cave. Cole was asleep again, his breathing deep and even. In the firelight, he looked peaceful, younger somehow. She could see nothing of his father in his features, but then she had never seen Captain Morrison. Only heard the stories, imagined the face that went with that hated name. Cole stirred as she settled onto her own sleeping furs, turning toward her in his sleep. Even unconscious, he seemed to seek her presence, and despite everything, her heart responded to that seeking. What was she going to do? Her first impulse was to wake him, to demand answers about his father's actions, to rage against the injustice that had brought her father's killer's son to her sanctuary. But what would that accomplish? Wong had been a child when the raid happened, no more responsible for his father's actions than she was for her father's decisions. Her second impulse was to poison his food, to finish what the arrow had started. Justice for her father, payment in blood for blood spilled. The thought was seductive, and she had the knowledge to make it happen. A few drops of water, hemlock in his evening tea, and by morning she would be alone again, the debt settled. But she couldn't. Whatever his bloodline, whatever his father had done, Cole himself had shown her nothing but kindness and respect. He had shared his food and stories, had listened to her speak of the old ways without judgment or mockery. He had laughed at her chipmunk and called her an angel. How could she kill a man who had never harmed her? But how could she love a man whose father had destroyed her world? The thought stopped her cold. Love, where had that come from? But as she lay there in the darkness, listening to Cole's quiet breathing, she couldn't deny what her heart already knew. Somewhere in the past 3 weeks, between the healing and the talking and the comfortable silences, she had begun to care for him. More than care for him. She had begun to fall in love with the enemy's son. The knowledge sat in her chest like a stone, heavy and inescapable. Tomorrow she would have to decide what to do about it. Whether to tell him the truth about who she was, about the connection between their families. Whether to ask him to leave or to stay, and see if love could bridge the gap that blood had carved between them. But tonight she would simply lie here and listen to him breathe and try to reconcile the impossible contradictions of her heart. Outside, the wind picked up again, singing its ancient song through the canyon walls. It sounded almost like mourning, or perhaps like hope. In the morning, everything would change. But for now, in the space between sleeping and waking, between past and future, there was only the gentle sound of breathing and the warm glow of the fire. It would have to be enough. Dawn came gray and cold, filtered through clouds that promised more snow. Ayana woke to find Cole already up, carefully adding wood to the fire with his good arm. He had wrapped a blanket around his shoulders against the morning chill, and his hair caught the firelight like burnished copper. "Morning," he said softly when he noticed she was awake. "Thought I'd try to be useful for once." She sat up slowly, pushing the dark hair back from her face. The knowledge of who he was sat heavy in her chest, making every interaction feel charged with hidden meaning. "Your wound," she said, nodding toward his shoulder. "How does it feel?" "Better every day thanks to your care." He moved his arm, carefully testing the range of motion. "I should be able to travel soon." Travel. The word came out sharper than she intended. Cole looked at her with those clear blue eyes, and she saw something shift in his expression. I've imposed on your kindness long enough, Ayana. You saved my life, gave me shelter, asked for nothing in return. The least I can do is get out of your way and let you return to your life. And where would you go? East, I think. Maybe back to Colorado territory. I have some family there, people who might, he trailed off shrugging. Somewhere I'm not wanted for questioning anyway. What happened to you, she asked, settling cross-legged by the fire. Who shot you? Cole was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. It's a long story, and not a particularly pleasant one. I have time. Do you... He looked at her again, and she saw wariness there now. Sometimes I get the feeling you're holding something back, like there's a part of yourself you keep locked away. Maybe it's not my story you need to hear. Her breath caught. Was she so transparent, or was he simply more perceptive than she had given him credit for? We all have secrets, she said carefully. True enough. Cole leaned back against the cave wall, his expression thoughtful. All right, you want the whole truth. I used to work for a man named Garrett Sloan. Big rancher owns most of the good grazing land between here and the Sweetwater River. He hired me to handle problems. What kind of problems? The kind that involved homesteaders who wouldn't sell small, ranchers who wouldn't be bought out, Indians who wouldn't stay on their reservation. His voice carried a weight of old shame. I wasn't a good man, Ayana. I did things, hurt people who didn't deserve it. She felt something cold settle in her stomach. You hurt my people. I followed orders, burned out families, ran off livestock, made it clear that staying meant suffering. He met her eyes directly. I told myself it was just business, that I was helping to bring civilization to wild country. But really, I was just another gun for hire, no better than a common outlaw. The confession hung between them like smoke from the fire. Ayana studied his face, seeing the genuine regret there, the self-recrimination. But it didn't change what he had done. How many families had he destroyed? How many lives had he ruined in service to this Sloan? What changed, she asked finally. A little girl, Cole said quietly. Couldn't have been more than 6 years old. Her parents were homesteaders, good people trying to build a life on a patch of land that Sloan wanted for grazing. When they wouldn't sell, he sent me to convince them. His hands clenched into fists in his lap. I was supposed to burn their barn, maybe run off their milk cow. Send a message, you know. But when I got there, the little girl was playing in the yard with a rag doll, singing some song her mother had taught her. She looked up at me with these big brown eyes and asked if I was there to see her papa about buying eggs. Ayana could picture it. The innocent child, the man with a torch in his hand, the moment when conscience finally spoke louder than orders. I couldn't do it, Cole continued. Couldn't take away her home, her safety, her childhood. So I rode back and told Sloan the homesteaders had already cleared out. Figured I'd buy the family some time, maybe help them find a way to make peace. But Sloan found out, eventually, and when he did, he made it clear that I'd outlived my usefulness. The arrow in my back was his way of terminating my employment. Cole touched his shoulder gingerly. His men made it look like Indian trouble, figured. If they found my body, they could use it to stir up sentiment against the local tribes. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Sloan's men had tried to frame her people for murder, and in doing so had delivered their victim directly into the hands of the very person they were trying to harm. I'm sorry, Cole said suddenly, for what I did for the people I hurt. I know that doesn't fix anything, but... No, Ayana cut him off. It does not fix anything. The words came out harsher than she had intended, but she couldn't seem to stop them. All the anger and pain she had been holding back since learning his name crashed over her like a flood. You speak of homesteaders and small ranchers, but what of the people who were here first? What of the families driven from their ancestral lands? The children who went hungry because you burned their food stores? The elders who died in winter camps because they could not return to their sacred places? Cole's face had gone pale. Ayana. My father was a chief, she continued, her voice rising despite her efforts to control it. A good man who sought peace with your people. He spoke against war, counseled patience and understanding. And men like you, men who follow orders without question, men who serve the powerful against the weak. Men like you are why he is dead. She was on her feet now, pacing the confines of the cave like a caged wolf. 15 years of suppressed rage poured out of her, and she couldn't have stopped it if she tried. You want to know about secrets, Cole Morrison? Here is mine. Every person I have healed, every life I have saved, has been an attempt to balance the scales, to atone for my failure to save the one life that mattered most. I could not save my father from your people's bullets, so I save whoever the spirits bring to me. She turned to face him and saw him staring at her with an expression of growing horror. Morrison, he repeated slowly. You know my father's name. I know more than his name. The words were bitter on her tongue. I know what he did, who he killed. I know because Chief Crow Feather was my father and Captain James Morrison murdered him in cold blood. The silence that followed was deafening. Cole sat frozen, his face white as the snow outside, staring at her, as if she were a ghost risen from the grave. No, he whispered, that's not. My father never. Never what? Ayana laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Never killed an Indian chief. Never led a cavalry raid against a peaceful village. Never shot down a man who was trying to protect women and children. My father was a good man, Cole said, but his voice lacked conviction. He saved my mother from the Apache who had taken her captive. Ayana shook her head. Or did he simply tell you that to justify his actions, how convenient that every village he attacked just happened to be harboring white captives? How fortunate that every peaceful chief he killed was secretly a savage raider. Cole struggled to his feet, his injured arm forgotten. You don't know what you're talking about. My father was honorable. He followed orders. He protected settlers. He murdered mine. The words came out flat and final. February 15th, 1863. Dawn attack on a winter camp in the Wind River Valley. 47 dead, including 12 children and my father. I was there, Cole. I saw the aftermath. I saw my father's body lying in the snow with your father's bullet in his heart. That's impossible. But even as he said it, she could see the doubt creeping into his eyes. If that's true, if you really are, why did you save me? Why didn't you let me die in the snow? Because I am not my father's daughter in that way, she said quietly. Because I choose healing over revenge, life over death. Because the spirits brought you to me, and I do not question their will. But you hate me. It wasn't a question. Ayana looked at him, really looked at him, saw the pain in his eyes that went deeper than any physical wound, the confusion and betrayal warring across his features, saw the way he held himself apart now, as if her words had put an invisible wall between them. No, she said, and the admission cost her more than she had expected. I wish I could. It would be so much simpler if I could hate you. Then what? Cole asked. What do you feel when you look at me? The question hung between them like a bridge neither wanted to cross. Ayana closed her eyes, trying to find words for the tangle of emotions in her chest. Confusion, she said finally. Pain, anger at the cruelty of fate that would bring you to me, and things I have no right to feel for the son of my enemy. Cole was quiet for a long time, absorbing the weight of her words. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. My father never spoke of that raid, never mentioned a Chief Crow Feather. But there were things I noticed as I got older. The way he'd wake up sometimes calling out names I didn't recognize. The way he'd drink himself unconscious on certain dates, February 15th among them. The guilt he carried that he thought no one could see. Ayana felt something shift inside her, a crack in the wall of certainty she had built around her father's death. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe my father wasn't the hero I thought he was. Maybe the man who raised me was haunted by things he couldn't undo, couldn't live with. Cole met her eyes. But I'm also saying that I was 8 years old when your father died, Ayana. Whatever guilt Captain Morrison carried, whatever sins he committed, they're not mine to bear. Are they not? The old anger flared again. You became a gun for hire, Cole. You burned out families, drove people from their homes. How is that different from what he did? It's not, Cole said simply, and I'll carry that shame for the rest of my life. But I'm not my father, just like you're not responsible for every Apache raid or Cheyenne war party. We're just two people trying to make sense of the blood our parents spilled. His words hit her like cold water, shocking in their clarity. How long had she defined herself By her father's death, how many years had she spent nursing rage against faceless enemies, holding on to pain like a treasured possession? I don't know how to do this, she said, her voice small and lost. Do what? Separate you from him, see you as yourself instead of his son. Let go of the anger that has shaped me since childhood. Cole took a careful step toward her, moving slowly as if approaching a wounded animal. Maybe you don't have to let go of it all at once, he said. Maybe we just take it one day at a time. See if we can find something real between us that belongs to us alone, not to our fathers or their choices. She looked up at him, seeing the hope in his eyes warring with the acceptance of possible rejection. This close, she could smell the smoke from the fire in his hair, see the small scar above his left eyebrow that spoke of some childhood mishap. And if we can't, she asked, if the ghosts are too strong, then at least we'll have tried, Cole said. At least we'll know we gave it a chance instead of letting the past decide our future for us. Ayanna studied his face, searching for any trace of his father in his features. But all she saw was the man who had laughed at her chipmunk, who had helped tend the fire, who had listened to her stories with genuine interest. The man who had confessed his own sins without excuse or justification. I need time, she said finally. Cole nodded, stepping back to give her space. I understand. And if you decide you want me gone, I'll go. No arguments, no pleading, your life, your choice. Where would you go? The question escaped before she could stop it. I don't know, Colorado maybe. Try to start over somewhere Sloane's influence doesn't reach. He shrugged, but she could see the loneliness in the gesture. I'm good at starting over. Had plenty of practice. The thought of him leaving, of returning to the silence and solitude that had been her life before he came, made her chest tight. But the thought of him staying, of trying to build something real with the son of her father's killer, terrified her even more. I'm going to gather plants, she said abruptly. You should rest. Your wound is not fully healed. Ayanna, please, she interrupted. I need to think. She grabbed her gathering basket and fled the cave, leaving Cole standing by the fire like a man watching his world crumble around him. Outside, the promised snow had begun to fall again, fat flakes that clung to her hair and eyelashes. She walked deeper into the canyon than she usually did, following the stream, until she found a sheltered grove where winter herbs still grew. But she didn't gather plants. Instead, she sat on a fallen log and let the tears come. For her father dead 15 years and still shaping her choices. For the child she had been, who had lost her world in one terrible dawn. For the woman she had become, isolated and angry, and so afraid of being hurt again that she barely remembered how to trust. And for Cole, whose only crime had been stumbling into her life at exactly the wrong moment. Or perhaps exactly the right one. The snow fell harder, muffling the sounds of the world, until all she could hear was her own breathing and the whisper of flakes against stone. In this white silence, she tried to imagine a future. She could ask Cole to leave, return to the solitude that had been her protection and her prison. She could tend her plants and practice her healing arts and grow old alone, nursing her righteous anger like a flame that would never die. Or she could choose something else, something harder and more frightening than anything she had ever attempted. She could choose to forgive. Not Captain Morrison. That wound might never fully heal. But Cole, who had never harmed her, who had shown her kindness and respect, and something that might grow into love if she let it. The thought should have horrified her. Instead, sitting there in the falling snow, it felt like the first breath after a long dive underwater. When she finally returned to the cave, Cole was gone. For a moment, panic seized her. Had he left while she was away? Decided that the weight of their shared history was too much to bear. Then she heard movement from deeper in the cave, and he emerged from the shadows carrying her water pot. Thought you might want fresh water when you got back, he said simply. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He had stayed. Despite everything, despite the pain she had thrown at him like stones, he had stayed. Cole, she said as he set the pot by the fire. About what I said. You don't have to apologize for telling the truth, he interrupted, even when the truth hurts. It's not an apology, she said. It's a question. What kind of question? The kind that might change everything. She took a breath, steadying herself. If we try this, if we try to build something between us, despite our fathers, despite the blood and pain and history, what would that look like? Cole went very still. What do you mean? I mean, she struggled to find the words. I mean, I have spent 15 years letting my father's death define me, letting hatred and anger guide my choices. And sitting out there in the snow, I realized that maybe the best way to honor his memory isn't to carry his pain forever, but to choose the path he would have chosen, which is peace, she said simply, understanding, the belief that people can be more than their worst moments, better than their bloodlines. Cole stared at her for a long moment, hope and disbelief warring in his expression. Are you saying, I'm saying I want to try, Ayanna said, to see if two people can overcome the sins of their fathers, to find out if love is stronger than legacy. The word hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Love. She had said it out loud, admitted what her heart had been whispering for days. Cole crossed the small space between them in two quick strides and cupped her face in his hands. His palms were warm against her skin, slightly rough from years of outdoor work. Are you sure? He asked softly. Because once we cross this line, there's no going back. We'll have to live with whatever we build together. I know, she whispered. I'm terrified, but I'm tired of being afraid more than I'm tired of being alone. Cole leaned down and kissed her, then soft and questioning at first, then deeper when she responded. His lips tasted of coffee and hope, and when they finally broke apart, she felt something fundamental shift in her world. So what now? She asked against his mouth. Now we take it one day at a time, he said. We build something new on the ashes of the old. We choose each other over the ghosts. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the canyon in pristine white. Inside the cave, two people sat by the fire and began the hard, hopeful work of learning to love across the scars of history. Neither knew that the hardest test of their newfound bond was still to come, that secrets darker than either had imagined lay buried in the past, waiting to surface like bones from a disturbed grave. For now, it was enough to hold each other close and promise to face whatever came together. The fire crackled softly between them, and the future stretched out like an unwritten page. 3 days after their first kiss, Cole woke from a nightmare screaming his father's name. Ayanna found him sitting bolt upright in their shared bed, sweat beading on his forehead, despite the cold morning air. His eyes were wide and unfocused, still seeing whatever horrors his dreams had conjured. Cole, she said softly, placing a gentle hand on his good shoulder. You are safe. You are here with me. He turned toward her, voice like a man surfacing from deep water, blinking as the cave came into focus around them. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't mean to wake you. What did you dream? Cole ran a shaking hand through his hair. Fire, gunshots, a man with a gray beard calling my name. He looked at her with haunted eyes. My father, I think, but not as I knew him. Older, desperate, like he was trying to tell me something important. Ayanna's heart clenched. In the 3 days since they had acknowledged their feelings for each other, Cole had grown increasingly troubled. Their conversations about their fathers had stirred something in him, memories and half-remembered details that didn't quite fit the story he had been told as a child. Tell me about the dream, she said, settling beside him on the furs. We were in a place I'd never seen before. Stone walls like a prison. My father was there, but he looked broken, aged beyond his years. He kept reaching for something, calling out, but I couldn't understand what he was saying. Cole shook his head. And there were others there too. Indians, but not dead. Captured maybe. Or what? Or hidden. The word came out like a revelation. Like they were being kept somewhere. A chill ran down Ayanna's spine that had nothing to do with the morning air. What would your father want to tell you? I don't know, but I think... Cole hesitated, then met her eyes. I think I need to find out. About the raid, about what really happened to your father. About why my dreams feel more like memories than nightmares. The suggestion hung between them like a loaded gun. Finding the truth about Chief Crowfeather's death meant potentially destroying the fragile peace they had built, uncovering secrets that might be better left buried. But it also meant the possibility of finally laying their ghost to rest. Where would we even begin? Ayanna asked. My father kept journals, records of his missions, his thoughts on the campaigns he led. Cole's expression was grim, but determined. When he retired, he moved to a ranch about 50 miles east of here. If he's still alive, if the journals still exist, you want to confront him. I want answers, Cole said firmly. For both of us. I'm tired of living in the shadow of things I don't understand. The journey took them 2 days through increasingly civilized country. As they traveled, Ayana found herself observing the changes that white settlement had brought to the land. Fenced pastures where buffalo once grazed farmhouses, sprouting like mushrooms after rain roads cutting straight lines across terrain that had once been crossed only by game trails. It was like watching her father's world be slowly erased, replaced by something entirely foreign. Cole grew quieter the closer they came to his father's ranch. By the time they crested the hill that overlooked the Morrison spread, his face was pale and set with determination. The ranch below was impressive. A large house built of native stone, several outbuildings, corrals filled with quality horses. A successful operation by any measure, the kind of prosperity that came from political connections and government contracts. He's done well for himself, Cole said quietly. Blood money often pays well, Ayana replied, then immediately regretted the harshness of her words. Whatever they discovered here, Cole didn't deserve her anger. They approached the house at midday when the ranch hands would be out working and conversation could be had in private. Cole knocked on the front door with steady hands, but Ayana could see the tension in the line of his shoulders. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s, gray-haired and worn, but still handsome. Her eyes widened when she saw Cole. "My God," she breathed. "Cole, is that really you?" "Hello, Martha," Cole said stiffly. "Is he here? Your father?" "Yes, he's—" "Cole, where have you been? It's been 2 years without a word. We thought you might be dead." "Close enough," Cole replied. "This is Ayana. We need to speak with him." Martha's eyes flicked to Ayana taking in her Apache features and traditional dress. Something shifted in the older woman's expression. Not hostility exactly, but a wariness that spoke of uncomfortable knowledge. "He's in the study," Martha said quietly. "But Cole, he's not well. The drinking, the nightmares. Some days he doesn't even know where he is." They found Captain Morrison slumped in a leather chair beside a coal fireplace, an empty whiskey bottle at his elbow. He was thinner than Cole remembered, his hair completely gray, now his face etched with lines of pain and regret. He looked up as they entered, and his eyes fixed on Ayana with an expression of such shock and horror that she instinctively stepped back. "No," the old man whispered. "You can't be here. You're dead. They're all dead." "Father," Cole said sharply, "who do you think she is?" Morrison struggled to his feet, swaying slightly. "Crow Feather's girl, little Ayana. But that's impossible. She died in the fever camps. Martha told me she died." The world tilted around them. Ayana felt Cole's hand close around hers, steadying them both as the implications crashed over them. "You know who I am," Ayana said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Know you?" Morrison laughed bitterly. "Child, I've been seeing your face in my nightmares for 15 years. You and your father and all the others, I failed to protect." "Protect?" Cole stepped forward, his confusion evident. "Father, what are you talking about? You led the raid that killed her people." "Is that what you think?" Morrison's eyes focused on his son with difficulty. "Is that the story they told you?" "It's the truth," Ayana said, finding her voice. "You murdered my father. 47 people died in that attack." 47 people died, yes, Morrison agreed, "but not from my bullets. From fever, from cold, from broken hearts in the camps where I hid them after faking their deaths." The silence that followed was deafening. Ayana felt the world shifting beneath her feet, everything she had believed about that day crumbling like sand. "That's impossible," she managed. Morrison walked unsteadily to a large desk and pulled out a thick leather journal. His hands shook as he opened it, revealing pages covered in careful handwriting. "February 10th, 1863, he read aloud. "Received orders from General Whitman to eliminate the Crow Feather Band. Civilians are pushing for a decisive action against hostiles. Have convinced the general that a peaceful band of mixed bloods poses no threat, but he insists the order stands. May God forgive me for what I must do." He turned the page. "February 14th. Have reached agreement with Chief Crow Feather. Will stage attack at dawn. His people will lie still when shot, pretend death. My men have been briefed to fire only blanks or aim deliberately wide. Crow Feather insists his daughter be kept unaware. Says a child cannot fake what she truly feels." Ayana's knees gave out. Cole caught her, easing her into a chair as Morrison continued reading. February 15th. The deception worked. Whitman's scouts found the bodies and reported total victory. Have transported the survivors to Hidden Canyon 30 miles north. 47 souls, including 12 children. Pray I can keep them safe until the political situation stabilizes. You saved them? Cole said, his voice hollow with shock. You saved her father. For 3 years, Morrison confirmed, until the fever came, until I watched them die one by one in that hidden valley, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do to stop it. His eyes fixed on Ayanna again. Your father made me promise to tell you he loved you, that he was proud of who you would become. He spoke of you every day until the end. Tears were streaming down Ayanna's face now, 15 years of grief and rage transformed into something else entirely. Relief, perhaps, or a pain so deep it felt like drowning. Why, Paula? She whispered. Why didn't you tell anyone? Why let them think you were a killer? Because admitting the truth would have meant court-martial and execution, Morrison said simply. Because there were other bands, other people who needed someone inside the system to protect them. Because your father asked me to let him be a martyr for peace rather than a collaborator with the enemy. He closed the journal with shaking hands. I've carried their ghosts for 15 years, child. Watched the fever take them one by one, buried them in that hidden canyon with my own hands. Your father was the last to go. He made me swear to find you, to tell you the truth when you were old enough to understand. But you never came, Ayanna said through her tears. I looked, Morrison replied. God help me, I looked everywhere. But you had disappeared, vanished like smoke. Some said you were dead, others that you had gone west with the Cheyenne. I finally gave up hope of ever making good on my promise. Cole helped Ayanna to her feet, his own face wet with tears. Where are they buried? He asked quietly. I'll show you, Morrison said, if you want to see, if you can bear it. The Hidden Canyon was a day's ride north, accessible only through a narrow defile that could be easily defended or hidden. Morrison led them there in silence, the weight of 15 years' secrets heavy on all their shoulders. The graves were marked with simple wooden crosses, weathered by time but still standing. At the head of them was a larger stone carved with Apache symbols that made Ayanna's heart clench with recognition. He taught me some of your language, Morrison explained as she knelt beside her father's resting place. Wanted his marker to say, beloved father, in the old tongue. Ayanna traced the carved symbols with trembling fingers, feeling the presence of the man who had shaped her life even in death. Chief Crowfeather, who had chosen cooperation over confrontation, who had trusted a white soldier with the lives of his people, who had died believing in the possibility of peace. I have hated you for nothing, she said to Morrison, the words torn from her heart. 15 years of anger, 15 years of pain, and it was all based on a lie. Not a lie, Morrison corrected gently, a necessary deception. Your father knew that sometimes the truth serves less well than a noble fiction. He wanted his people to remember him as a chief who died protecting them, not as one who collaborated with their enemies. But I could have known, Ayanna protested. I could have been with him when he died. I could have said goodbye. Yes, Morrison agreed, and that is a sin I will carry to my own grave. The choice to spare you the knowledge that your father lived in hiding for 3 years, watching his people die of diseases we couldn't cure. He thought it was mercy. I'm no longer sure he was right. Cole knelt beside Ayanna at the graveside, his hand finding hers among the carved symbols. What now? He asked softly. She closed her eyes, trying to reconcile the father of her childhood memories with this new image. Not a martyr to white aggression, but a man who had made impossible choices in impossible times. A leader who had chosen pragmatism over pride, survival over glory. Now we honor them, she said finally. All of them. Your father for the courage to defy his orders. My father for the wisdom to see past old hatreds. The others for their sacrifice and faith. She stood slowly, turning to face Morrison. The old soldier looked fragile in the mountain sunlight, worn down by years of carrying other people's grief. Thank you, she said simply. For saving them, for protecting them, for keeping faith with your own promise, even when you couldn't fulfill it. Morrison's composure finally cracked. I failed them, he whispered. They trusted me to keep them safe, and I watched them die anyway. You gave them 3 years they wouldn't have had otherwise, Ayanna replied. 3 years of life of hope, of believing that peace was possible between our peoples. That is not failure. They built a fire beside the graves that night, sharing stories of the dead and trying to make sense of the truths they had uncovered. Morrison spoke of Chief Crow Feather with deep respect, describing a man of profound wisdom and quiet courage. He could have chosen to fight, the old soldier said. His warriors wanted blood for blood war until one side or the other was utterly destroyed. But your father saw further than that. He understood that real victory meant survival adaptation, finding a way for his children to live in the changing world. He was right, Ayanna said quietly. But all wisdom comes at a cost, Cole observed. The question is whether we're willing to pay it. They slept beside the fire that night under stars that seemed brighter than usual. When morning came, they said their final goodbyes to the dead and began the journey back to Morrison's ranch. What will you do now? The old man asked Cole as they prepared to leave. I don't know, Cole admitted. Try to build something good, I think. Try to honor what they started here. Morrison nodded, then turned to Ayanna. Your father left something for you. I've kept it all these years, hoping someday. He disappeared into the house and returned with a small bundle wrapped in deerskin. Inside was a silver bracelet inlaid with turquoise and a letter written in careful English script. He learned to write just so he could leave this for you, Morrison explained. Said he wanted you to have his words even if he couldn't speak them himself. Ayanna opened the letter with trembling hands and read, My daughter, if you are reading this, then Captain Morrison has kept his word and found you at last. I pray you are grown into the strong woman I always knew you would become. I have made choices that you may not understand. I chose to trust our enemies, to work with them rather than against them. I chose to let our people believe I died in battle rather than know I lived in hiding. These choices have cost much, perhaps too much, but I do not regret them because they were made from love. Love for you, for our people, for the hope that someday the children of all nations might live together in peace. Captain Morrison has shown me that there are good hearts among the whites, just as there are warrior spirits among our own people. You will have to choose your own path now, daughter. I pray you will choose wisely with your heart, but also with your mind. Remember that the greatest courage is not in fighting our enemies, but in learning to live with them. Be strong, be wise, be happy. Your loving father, Crow Feather. By the time she finished reading, tears were flowing freely down Ayanna's face. Cole's arms came around her, and she leaned into his strength as the last pieces of her shattered world rearranged themselves into something new. He knew, she whispered. Even then, he knew we would find each other. Maybe, Cole said softly, or maybe he just knew that love finds a way regardless of the obstacles we put in its path. They stayed at the ranch for 3 more days, helping Morrison organize his journals and records. The old soldier had decided to write a book to tell the true story of what had happened in that hidden canyon. It would destroy his reputation, possibly land him in prison, but he no longer cared about such things. The truth deserves to be told, he said simply, even if it comes too late to matter. On their last evening, as they sat around the dinner table sharing a meal, Morrison made an unexpected offer. Stay, he said quietly, both of you. Help me run this place. Help me make it into something your father would have been proud of. Ayanna and Cole exchanged glances. It was tempting. Security, respectability, a chance to build something lasting. But it wasn't their path. Thank you, Cole said finally. But we need to find our own way. Make our own choices. Morrison nodded understanding. Where will you go? West, I think, Ayanna said. There are people there who need healing, families trying to build new lives away from all this blood and history. Maybe we can help them. Maybe we can help each other, Cole added, taking her hand. They left the next morning as the sun was rising, riding west toward the mountains and whatever future awaited them there. Behind them, Morrison stood on his porch watching until they disappeared from sight, and for the first time in 15 years, his shoulders weren't bowed with guilt. The journey ahead would not be easy. There would be towns that didn't welcome mixed couples, people who couldn't see past the color of their skin or the differences in their backgrounds. There would be days when the weight of their father's legacy felt too heavy to bear. But they had something now that neither had possessed alone. The strength that comes from choosing love over fear, hope over hatred, future over past. They had learned that some wounds can only heal when you stop picking at the scab, that some bridges can only be built when both sides are willing to meet in the middle. And they had the memory of Chief Crow Feather, who had seen past the uniform to the man beneath, and Captain Morrison, who had risked everything to honor a promise to a people he had been ordered to destroy. As they rode toward the setting sun, Ayanna felt something she had never experienced before. Not the absence of pain, but its transformation into something useful. The grief was still there, but it had become a tool for understanding rather than a weapon for hurting. The love was still fragile, still tested by every mile they traveled together, but it was real and chosen and strong enough to build a life on. "What do you think they would say," she asked Cole as they made camp that first night, "if they could see us now?" Cole considered the question, staring into the fire they had built together. "I think," he said finally, "they would say we chose well, that we honored their sacrifice by refusing to let it define our hatred." "And I think," Ayanna added, settling beside him in the circle of firelight, "they would say that the best memorial to the dead is a life lived fully by the living." They sat in comfortable silence, then watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new choices, new opportunities to prove that love really could conquer the sins of the past. But tonight they were simply two people who had found each other against all odds, holding each other close and promising to face whatever came together. The fire burned low and the future stretched out before them like an unwritten song. In the distance, a night bird called out its haunting melody, and somewhere in the sound was the echo of voices long stilled. A chief who had chosen peace over war, a soldier who had chosen mercy over orders, and all the others who had sacrificed their lives so that these two might find a way to love across the scars of history. The healing had begun at last.